Imposter syndrome. Like that's another thing that's like this false human conditioning, misleading human conditioning that's outdated. I definitely used to believe this, and therefore this residual evolution process is imposter syndrome, that it's this monster that's against you doing great things, and it's natural. And, the word natural might mean, it's common and it's nothing to be, too worried about or something. And I agree on that level, but I think imposter syndrome is normally pretty genuine and a pretty useful indicator of something, not everything. Like, if you look at it, it's kind of like when you're trying to be something you're not. People, maybe it's a hard idea to digest, because you so want or so think you want the thing that's on the other side of that fear, and you may get there, and it doesn't mean it's not genuine. I was definitely terrified of the idea of filmmaking when I was like 18. Now we're making stuff, I just don't seem to care. Same things, still filmmaking. Right? But I think I had more expectations and projections, and so it's again the solution seeking. So when I've cast filmmaking as solution, path to glory, riches, fame, and widespread approval, then the way I approach it is by default likely pushing something I'm not. You can let go of the hot thing because you've been holding it too long, and just let go, regroup, and then pick it up again and hold it in a way that doesn't hurt you, I think. But the imposter syndrome is a reliable indicator, because there's a lot of people who, I think one of the Atlassian guys, so if anyone doesn't know Atlassian, it's Australia's most famous and I think biggest tech company, by I think Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar are the founders. And one of them did a TED talk about still facing imposter syndrome, I think. And sorry to whoever it was, but there's a lot of people high up, who have achieved things in the material world. They're successful. Everyone who listens to the podcast knows I love that word, successful.
It's a lot of truth in that word.
Got to be successful in this life, because you're not already just by being alive.
Come on, man. Let's
cute.
Cut the woo-woo stuff.
That was too cute. Yeah, I got ahead of myself there. There's a lot of them who had to justify, rationalize, or come up with a narrative for why they still feel imposter syndrome. And they're in positions of what a lot of people desire and see as and there's a lot of great stuff that comes from being a great singer or an actor or a business. It can be such a rewarding challenge and journey. Bless you all. It's great. But no, I really do mean it.
I know, I get it.
It's just funny the way I said it.
Yeah, bless you all.
But you don't, it's not essential, cuz.
What the fuck?
Like, can we calm down?
What is, how do you...
It's like people there's so many people I love, writers and stuff, who talk about imposter syndrome and not let it get to you and conquer it and stuff. And it's like almost the opposite approach I would take.
Are we jumping at shadows?
What do you mean, in this conversation? Or
No,
with imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're jumping at reflections. We look in the mirror and we don't see ourselves looking back. We see something with a costume. And the imposter syndrome is saying, what are you doing? This is not who you are. Why would you feel imposter syndrome? Why?
It could be also an indication you're not seeing things clearly as well.
Yeah. Hey, look, the conditioning is a very real thing. So part of it can be conditioning, right? I totally get that. Like, a time you exposed yourself or something before, you shared something and it wasn't met well, or you were laughed at or ridiculed, and so you're hypersensitive. I'm not chucking that out. I'm not saying every time you feel imposter syndrome, you're being a disingenuous person or something. I'm walking with my current thinking, which is that I shared, pretty intimate details about my life in lots of episodes, and in the book 18 Lost.
Yep.
Now, hopefully it wasn't from a place of fake vulnerability, which is like the please everyone cry for me and what I've been through.
Yeah.
Or look how vulnerable I can be. Hopefully it wasn't from that place. Didn't feel like it, but shit, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
But why didn't I feel afraid putting it out there? But also, I also look at that stuff, and sometimes people think there's bravery associated with sharing intimate things about yourself, because you think that those things are pretty embarrassing. But I sometimes I think the thought that follows that is, what's there to hide? I don't need to tell you everything I've been through, and I haven't, But I also think, what are we so ashamed of? Like, I don't like talking about other people's intimate secrets. You just don't want to do that. It's other people's stuff. But if I told you I've been insecure about things like being in a relationship, insecure about things like money, we had the unhealthy ambition episode. There's a lot of shit that ran through my head and stuff. And I got attached to things I was working on that were meant to be pro-social endeavors. I just don't see the reason why we need to wrap the bullshit up in more bullshit. But you don't need to shout it from the rooftop. To me, this is my dance. It's just part of what I do. It's not that everyone has to write their chapter of life after high school and publish it. This is just what I'm attracted to, the writing and the podcasting and all that. But what do we have to hide? You would only feel insecure if there's something you're defensive about, you're insecure about.
Yes.
And I don't know if I shared this with you. My current way of trying to articulate is if I shout at you, call you a blue elephant, or you call me blue elephant, I'm not going to get offended, no matter how angry you get saying it. Like, Joe, you're a blue elephant. Well, if you start hitting me, I might go, why is he hitting me? Because there's no resonance of truth to it. But I think it was Naval talking to Tim Ferriss. He goes, but if people called us fake gurus, we'd probably get a bit defensive, because we probably suspect it's true on some level. He nailed it.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is. And if you're insecure about it, it might not be true, but you are worried that it's true. That's what I think it means.
You wouldn't have the reaction.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we think too much.
Yeah, we do. And maybe this episode is thinking too much. But I like unpacking it.
No, it's certainly
because that's why I think I like Taleb stuff, because even though it can be very complicated, it tends to be the sort of complicated that removes infinitely more complication. That's what I kind of like doing here, because these things around how do you deal with imposter syndrome, if it's not based in reality, there's the Alan Watts quote, questions that remain persistently insoluble and solvable must be suspected as questions asked the wrong way. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't figure it out, you keep going round and round and round, maybe the question you're asking is wrong. So reality seems to have these loops like that. It just helps us, like, if this is that hard to figure out, the question you're asking might be wrong. You know what I mean? Like, how do I become rich? And I can't think of the answer. It's like, the why do you want to be rich? Yes, there are benefits that will come with being rich. Great if you end up rich. But why do you? That's it's replacing the question. Like, I'm thinking if I'm rich, I'll be loved. I can attract the right people into my life, and my life will be worthwhile. You can get at it. But if you're going to pretend to be something, so we often do the, watch the movie Avatar, where they become a big blue thing. You know, it's not the real them. Yeah, it's just the premise of the movie. I'm not spoiling anything. But, is that what we do? try and be a bigger, turn ourselves into a bigger version of ourselves so we can get what the current desire is. And it's not the true us. And if it's not the true us, I think that's where the things like a lot of anxiety and imposter syndrome probably come in. Not the only source of anxiety, of course. I'm sure it's a very complex thing, but it's there in us for a reason. So, you know, if you suspect, I think if you feel imposter syndrome, it's just a good example for self-examination. It's not something to ignore and just push past it. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at, right or wrong. Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. Just remember that any more like this are available on the channel. If you ever want more in terms of sometimes I share short stories I write, articles, and also updates around things in my world like comedy work, The Constant Student, book releases, things like that. I have an email newsletter called The Doorman. It's a Substack-based newsletter, and you can sign up for that. Just find the link in the description or the show notes based on wherever you're watching or listening to the episode. Thanks, and enjoy the wrap-up. That's where I'm at. It doesn't mean you have to stop whatever the imposter syndrome's pointing at. Like, I think even when you talked about the new workplace and senior people and the intimidation that comes with that, that's so common, right? Like authority figures. It's a very common part of human experience, but it doesn't mean you should.
I think if you're feeling quote unquote imposter syndrome in that sense or anxiety in that sense, it's a clear, you're not seeing things clearly.
I think sometimes you adjust, like you might not feel you've had enough time to adjust to the situation.
Yeah.
That's sometimes the result of if you're catapulted up. But it's very often that we're catapulted up in terms of level of influence, status, power, money. We are capable of accelerating it more than we probably would have liked to if we look back.
Yep.
It can happen. It's like the lottery winner is the extreme example. There's seem to be so many miserable tales of lottery winners because it's a lot, but it's like being given the 300 kilogram weights, after not being able to lift the 50s. It's like, if you want to get to be able to lift a lot of weight, you got to incrementally.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. And it's hurtful. It's the myth of the get rich quick dream or the get famous quick dream. You tend to learn your lessons. And so to me, a lot of the tactics, this is why I'm very tactics should just fall into place, not be like part of ingredients you're kind of baking in. Because tactics normally what we do when we're trying to bend the reality too much. That's normally when we've veered outside, letting it organically progress. We get super tactical. We get super desperate. So, I don't know. It's imposter syndrome, I think. It's a very interesting one.
Very interesting to sit with.
All right, we'll keep sitting with it. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Joe. Time to have some...
Let's have dinner.
I'm quite hungry.